Good Friday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for November the 8th. Today we are reading together Psalm 131. The 131st Psalm has been given the title in my Bible, A Childlike Spirit. This is another of the songs of ascents. We began reading these songs of ascents back in Psalm 120, and including today's, we have four left. Our psalm today here, as I mentioned, is a song of ascents. And then our three next week will be songs of ascents. And then the following week will begin the final run of our psalms here in the Psalter. Hope they've been a blessing to you. And we want to read together here today Psalm 131. Again, given the title in my Bible, A Childlike Spirit. And this is of David, which is very interesting. That great King David, one of the most lauded characters in all of Scripture, desires and speaks here of having a childlike spirit, almost like it reminds us of the teaching of Jesus, that we are to become like little children. So think about that as we read along together here, Psalm 131. Psalm 131, beginning in verse number 1. Short psalm today, but so hopefully some good thoughts for us to think about as we go throughout this day. Psalm 131 in verse number 1, Yahweh, my heart is not proud. My eyes are not haughty. I do not get involved with things too great or too wondrous for me. Instead, I have calmed and quieted my soul. Like a weaned child with its mother, my soul is like a weaned child. Israel, put your hope in Yahweh, both now and forever. Psalm 131. I didn't mention, but I think this psalm could be categorized as a wisdom slash confidence psalm. We don't have anything mentioned here about Zion, so we do break from the pattern that we've been seeing so far in these songs of ascents, where we have a lament psalm followed by a confidence psalm, followed by a psalm that has some element of Zion in it. We don't see that here within the psalm, so it's not a perfect pattern throughout the songs of ascents. But what we do have here certainly is wisdom and confidence. Wisdom in seeing David's recognition of the type of attitude that he needs to have, and then that wisdom leads him to not be self-indulgent, to not be self-seeking, but to put confidence totally in God. So it begins with Yahweh, my heart is not proud. David's heart was not one where he was constantly thinking about how much he needs. I need this. I deserve that. And he says, my eyes are not haughty, where his eyes are not literally lifted up or looking down his nose at other people. David says, that's not my mindset. I'm not proud. I've not striven to be haughty. Humility is certainly something that David has sought to embrace. And again, it's interesting that this is the type of mindset that the king would have, because of all the people that we think would have a mindset of wanting more and more, it would be the one who is in the greatest amount of power. And yet think back to a couple of instances in David's life. I forgot to write these down. Think back to First Samuel, I believe it's 24 and 26, if I remember correctly. Yeah, First Samuel 24 and 26, where he could have taken the leadership from Saul. He could have went ahead and ended his reign and taken that kingdom for himself, taken the throne for himself, but he didn't do that. He was not self-seeking. He was not self-indulgent, which plays on with the rest of verse number 1, where he says that I do not get involved with things too great or too wondrous for me. Meaning I don't get above my pay grade. That I don't try to take up positions that are more than I need or more than I deserve. Now you would say, well, how then does a little shepherd boy go from being a little shepherd boy, the youngest in the house of Jesse, to being the king over Israel? Well, this wasn't something that David pursued, but instead this was something that God pursued in David. That God knew David was the king that he wanted, and he went after him to put him into this position. So again, humility is the word that comes to mind more than anything else here in this first verse. And then in the second verse, the next word that comes to my mind is contentment. Contentment. So there's humility mixed with contentment. Of course, there's great wisdom in embracing these type of attitudes. Instead, he says, I have calmed and quieted my soul. I have calmed and quieted my soul, meaning that he's done the work to calm himself and to quiet himself. He has disciplined himself to not be so fired up and fretful. He's not being restless in what he wants to do, like a non-weaned child would be. Like a weaned child with his mother, my soul is like a weaned child. So think about the opposite verse. Whenever a child is not weaned, whenever a child is still fed from his mother or her mother, that child, whenever it gets hungry, what's it going to do? Well, it's going to cry. It's going to get fussy. It's going to become very irritable until it receives the nursing. But what does a weaned child do? Well, a weaned child is able to be content and is able to wait to be fed in to some degree instead of demanding all the time. So that's the difference here is the weaned child is not content. The non-weaned child is not content. The non-weaned child can become very fussy, very restless. But instead, what we see from David here is that I'm like that weaned child. I can find contentment and I can be patient and wait for what I need to be given to me. So then he turns to Israel and he says, Israel, do as I do. Just as I have put my hope in Yahweh, you too need to put your hope in Yahweh. You too need to be humble. You too need to be content. For in these things, there's great wisdom. Becoming like a little weaned child. There's much wisdom in that, which again takes us to Matthew 18, where Jesus says, you need to become like little children. And he invites the little children to come to him. Why? Because these are attitudes and characteristics of children that we need to embrace. That children are nothing really. Their value, especially in that culture, was so little. And so there had to be this humility that was embraced, this understanding of whatever I get, it is a grace from whoever gives it to me. And from our perspective, whenever it comes to God and our standing before him as little children, we need to recognize that whatever God gives us, we need to be content with that. And we don't need to be self-seeking and self-indulgent, trying to go, as he says at the end of verse number 1, trying to get involved with things that are too great or too wondrous for us. Be content where we are, be thankful, be grateful, and put all of our hope, all of our trust, all of our confidence in Yahweh and what he provides for us. This was the mindset here of David within this text. And then this needs to be our mindset as well, because we recognize that when this isn't our mindset, when we might pursue things that are too great or too wondrous for us, well, that's whenever the Bathsheba type of chapter showed up in David's life. But whenever he was content, whenever he was embracing this attitude of humility, when he was just hoping and putting confidence in Yahweh, things went well. And that could be true. That should have been true for Israel. That should have been true for Israel too. And that can be true for us as well. If you have any questions or comments about Psalm 131, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. And thanks so much for taking some time to read along with me today on this Friday. We will be gathering together on Sunday for our Bible study at 10, our worship at 11, and we'll be reading again together on Monday from Psalm 132. Psalm 132. Looking forward to reading that with you then. Take care and God bless.